Hi everyone. You'll see I have changed the camera angle slightly. I don't know if this is better or not. But you get, I think my face is more in the middle of the screen. Still not in the middle of the screen, but that's fine. We can work with that. So the last book I read, and I'm trying to do this relatively quickly, was Catch 22. So Joseph Heller, published in, I think it was published in the 60s, but obviously kind of is very much linked to Joseph Heller's previous career as a bomber pilot. So he served in the Second World War towards the end. He was very young, I think. I think he was about 19, and he kind of says himself that the missions he ran were what is like mostly what are known as milk runs, which is sort of easier, simpler missions where the risk of danger was relatively low. But he did obviously serve in the war. He obviously has a is writing a bit from experience as well. So look, everyone knows the book, everyone knows the quote, and it's one of those classic books that is on those 100 books you have to read before you're 40 or 50 or before you die or whatever milestone is closest to yours at the time. Those books tend to have this reputation that they are difficult and dense, and to be honest, I am like a little bit put off by a lot of them. I've got Ulysses on my shelf, and it just looks massive and pretty dense, and it looks like it's going to be quite hard to get through. And I don't know when, if ever, I'm going to read it, but it's on my shelf, so I said I would at some point. This one isn't like that, or certainly I didn't find it. I didn't find it hard to read. I actually really enjoyed the reading experience of it. It's sort of a mid-length book, I would say. And look, I know everyone knows what it's about, but maybe if I just cover, so it covers the an American air squad sort of camp set up on an island. I think it's Pianosa, I can't remember, a very small island off of Italy where they have a camp and a whole military operation going on there. It's set towards the end of the war. Um, it is, in terms of plot, it it doesn't really have one. It just follows each character sort of non-linearly, so the time jumbles all about, and it's, well, people say it's difficult to keep track of, but we can maybe talk about that in a second. I didn't find it particularly difficult to keep track of where you were and in the timeline, but it basically just follows each individual character. So each chapter is the point of view of one of these characters, and some of those characters are covered multiple times, some are only covered once, talking about the ongoings of the war, the bombing expedition, what they do in their leisure time, and the operations that they have to deal with. It is, like I said, there's no real plot. About four things happen, and you kind of get to see those from different perspectives, but they are not and they are big things, like they're big deals. Some are very poignant moments, but if you're reading it for the plot, or if you're a plot first person, this isn't really the book for you. I don't even know. It's kind of a character first book, but I don't even really know that it's that. Obviously, people know it for the phrase. Obviously, Catch 22. Everyone knows the meaning of that. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by explaining that. But it interesting, or at least interesting to me, is one, he wasn't going to name the book Catch 22, and then two, he like the number 22. He said he made up for. Oh, there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is, but basically because it sounds good. Like there was no there was no real meaning behind it, and he was actually going to call it something else, like Catch 28, or I can't remember the exact number, but something like that. And the only reason he didn't was there was another book that came out that year that also had the same number that he wanted to use, so he just changed it to Catch 22. So uh, it is one of those books that is like has a that is required reading and blah blah blah. But I would say it's one of the best ones of those I've ever read. And actually, I don't know if it's just my sense of humour, but it pretty much hit exactly my sense of humour on almost almost every level. Like I've never laughed so much at a book, I think, ever. Like there was one point I was reading it on the train, like going into work, and like for about 10 minutes I was just giggling on this table of like four people. I just couldn't. I physically couldn't stop laughing. They all looked at me like I was a bit strange, but it was like I've never really had that experience with a book, with TV, with Alan Partridge or something, like sure, but not with a book. So that was good. It is very funny, like, and it's not just sort of the humor isn't rare. It's constant. It's throughout. It has this really dark edge. I should point out, like it's not. There are like the humor is certainly black humor. It's not always black humor, but like if you don't like black humor, I don't think you'll like it. But also there are some like they almost come out of the blue, just horrible moments that are pretty scarring, to be honest. So it's if you're very sensitive to sort of dark, pretty graphic, both psychological and physical abhorrences, I guess, then I wouldn't read it, because they are there and they're not really foreshadowed that clearly. Like you won't be able to just skip them. I don't think you won't really see them coming. It's also very much of its time, I would say. I don't think that means that it's. I think it just. I don't know quite how to say this diplomatically, but there are passages within it that make you know that it wasn't written in the modern day. I mean, obviously, it's very clearly not written in the modern day, but there are just themes and things that are covered that I don't think you'd really cover today. Those are prevalent in it as well. But I think even if you you are sensitive to those, I think it's still worth reading. It has this incredible message going through it, and it pokes fun at war, obviously, and it kind of highlights just the pointlessness, I guess, of war in quite a digestible way. But it also, I think, there's other things it covers. So I'd thought as I was reading it, like this really feels like a commentary on kind of bureaucracy and like just how stupid institutional things can be at times. And apparently, like that is deliberate. That's in there deliberate. But that really comes through as well to me. Like almost as much as the war thing is just the sort of how unnecessary a lot of bureaucracy is, how it sort of ties itself in knots, and also actually how there are people who are willing to kind of in micro increments get ahead a little bit, and in order to do that, they're very happy to sacrifice whatever they can to get that, like that sense of morality. There's kind of a disconnect between their sense of morality because there's sort of there's a barrier between their actions and them being able to see the results of those actions directly. There's this kind of barrier that allows people to take what are clearly morally grey, or not even morally grey, just morally bad decisions for the sake of their own advancement, and they're kind of completely fine with that. And that is very clear throughout the book. I think very well telegraphed and just interesting to read about. So the other thing is it's obviously anti-war, and it's kind of interesting. I read a little bit more about this. So Heller wrote this. When he wrote this, I think it was coming up to the Vietnam War and America's involvement in the Vietnam War. And as I understand it, the book isn't so much a commentary on the Second World War, even though it's set in the Second World War, because the Second World War was kind of seen as a good war, so to speak. Like there was a very clear reason why the Americans and obviously the Brits and the Allies in general would want to fight the Germans, who were clearly doing some pretty horrendous things. And so there was a real these bad things are happening in the Second World War, and the Allies need to prevent those things from happening. And so the popular support for the war and the general kind of morals and morale and sentiment back home for people was generally positive of the war. That isn't true, or certainly is not anywhere near as true as it as in the Vietnam War. And so I think, as I understand it, this book was more to sort of highlight the pointlessness of the Vietnam War rather than the Second World War. There are some amazing quotes in it throughout. I should have come prepared with those here, but like I've probably got 10 or 15 quotes that I've just written down, and no, I'm going to find one. Hold on. So here we go. Here's one. So you're gonna hear my spectacular acting voice now. We're ready. So the country was in peril. He was jeopardising his traditional rights of freedom and independence by daring to exercise them. Genuinely, I don't know what more you'd want in a quote, right? It's pithy, it's funny, it has a clear message. And the book is full of these, right? Like they're not as good as this one throughout, obviously, but there are a lot of these. There's a lot of like very funny things as well. It's one of, I think, one of my favourite books that I've read, and it was sort of on my list as a book I had to read. And I tried to read it like maybe 10 years ago. I tried to read it, and I remember because I was expecting something completely different when I read it. I thought it would be a very serious, dark, difficult book to read. And so I'd sort of mentally prepared myself for that. And then when I read it 10 years ago, I got about maybe a fifth of the way through and realised that it wasn't like this. It was kind of light-hearted, or sort of light-hearted. And like light-hearted isn't the word, because obviously the content and the subject matter is very serious, but the tone is very irreverent throughout. And I just wasn't expecting that at all, and it really put me off. It really discombobulated me. So I had to put it down, and then I obviously picked it up now. I'm really glad I read it. It's made me also want to read more of the I don't know if classics is the word, but the sort of your bucket list books. It's really made me want to read more of them. So like I'm now starting to think that maybe I'll like Count of Monte Cristo, even though I thought I wouldn't, because I thought it'd be too dense and long. But I'm kind of questioning my opinion on those now, which is a good thing, obviously. So that's it. I've kind of rambled. There's no structure, which is good. But I'd be interested to hear all your thoughts on all this. And thanks for watching.